All right, everyone. Hello. Great for all of you to be joining us. So this is an Ask Me Anything with Ryan, and I'm going to butcher your last name, as I'm sure many people do. Panchadsaram. Did I say it correctly?
Good, Ryan Panchadsaram, yes.
Awesome. Ryan, you have the most incredible background. So currently partner at Kleiner, I think for the last 5 years, have previously worked at Microsoft, Salesforce, launched a startup that was acquired, former deputy CTO of the United States. We're going to talk about that, obviously. Literally, what have you not done? So we'll come to all of that in a minute. For everybody who's tuning in, we're about 70 people and counting right now. Obviously, this is in English. We will take a lot of questions. I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions. Please post them in the questions section, not in the chat section. And you can ask them in French and English. Those are the language I will be taking today. Any other language, I won't get it.
And if there's anything that in this conversation that I share that if you'd love me to re-explain it or say it again, just drop that in the chat or the questions part. And please, I'd love to go back over things again, because the beautiful part is OKRs are very simple. And so if I've made them complicated, please hold me accountable.
Super. That was an element I left out of your bio. You're absolutely right to bring that up. You're also co-founder of What Matters and OKR expert. I don't know if we call you that, or the co-founder of the OKR kind of like movement with What Matters. But we'll get a chance to dive into all of that as well, because OKRs are somewhat less well known and developed on this side of the Atlantic. But Ryan, before we start off with kind of like me digging into your background, I'd love to know, what did you think you were going to do when you were little?
Oh wow. When I was little, I feel like maybe like others, it was like whatever last movie I watched, right? Jurassic Park, I was like paleontologist, right? Free Willy, I was like, okay, marine biologist. And then I remember there was like a space camp movie. I was like, I'm gonna be an astronaut. And so it was like this very much of a connection of what did I see and so forth. But I honestly, yeah, it was clearly leaning toward building things or experiencing things. I definitely knew that's where I wanted to kind of set out, but
super. Well, and here you are today building things. Tell me, of all the experience that you've had to date, which has been your favorite professional experience and why?
Wow. For me, it's been my time in government. I always love the time there because of the work that we got to do. For folks that are here in Europe, in the US, we do there were a set of things. I think it applies everywhere. We want our governments to do a lot for us, and we expect a lot from them. And technology can play a part and a role in making them do incredible things. And so I got really lucky to be a part of a group of folks that helped fix a lot of crises in the US federal government, as well as to just do really good things on the behalf of our taxpayers. When you think of success, it can be, in life, it's like the fun things can, what's the right way to say this? It's like in government, your success is measured on how many people you help. And so whenever I think about the accomplishments in my life, I always go back to those times, because we were helping people get healthcare. We were helping people get access to benefits that they deserved. And so I love those 4 years that I spent in DC, Roxanne.
Awesome. And I'm obviously curious to dive into that in a bit more detail, because I think everyone watching wants to know, what does the deputy CTO of the US even do? But before, I want to know, how did you end up in that role? Like, was there like an offer that was posted online? How do you get that job?
So I was an entrepreneur before I went into government. And so I was building a digital health company. We were trying to help patients when they were discharged from hospitals, making sure that they were followed up on and that they wouldn't go back in early, right? We wanted them to recover really well. And then the White House put out this opportunity for a program called the White House Presidential Innovation Fellows. And one of them was in healthcare. And one of them was about getting access to patient health records and helping empower people with that. And I saw that and I was like, well, my startup here is making a small dent in the health ecosystem. But if I were to go into government, and in the US, the government plays a big role in our healthcare system, I could probably do some real good there. I may not be able to move as quickly and fast, but I could take this really big ship and move it just like 2 inches forward. And that would be a meaningful thing. And so it was this fellowship. This fellowship was meant to be just 6 months, and then 6 months turned into 3.5 years, but it was a fellowship to then being a senior advisor on data across government. And then because of this crisis called healthcare.gov, I became the deputy chief technology officer because this crisis was so bad that we decided we'd never want that to happen again to any other government agency. And so that was my charge as deputy CTO. You asked, what does the deputy chief technology officer do? We try to make the most happen in government with the resources and technology that we have. And we also then too try to make the most happen in the country as well too. And so our office had two mandates: make the most out of the technology that's happening in government, but also inspire entrepreneurs and for people across the US to be building great things and innovating and so forth. And so our office had a pretty big mandate, but we were a small team that really took advantage of the fact that the government was really big and there's a lot of really inspiring people across the country that wanted to do things.
Interesting. And there's probably a lot of people listening right now that feel that maybe if you actually want to make a difference, government is not the place to do it. It's really bureaucratic. It's really complicated. You can't move things. What do you say to that?
Yeah, you're not wrong, right? Government is bureaucratic. It is really hard to move things. But what you'll find there sometimes is there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, right? That saying, at least in the US, means that it's so low that you can grab it and fix it and do things really easily. Sorry, not easily, but if you fix it, it has a pretty big impact. And so it is hard. It does take a team. I think our philosophy in the US was, how do you get not just one technologist in the government, but how do you get thousands? How do you get 10,000, right? How do you make the culture of service a part of being a techie, right? A lot of doctors in the US, a lot of lawyers in the US spend time in government as part of their careers. Our kind of thing now is, well, how can we all, right, spend a moment in government, but then come back? I think there's no doubt, though, building a company and a startup or building a new nonprofit or building, going into government, these are all different ways to make an impact. And so I'm also a big believer that one is not better than the other. These are all equally challenging, venues, and, that kind of leads into the goal setting stuff as well too. And so, but yeah, that's my thought on government work.
Good, we'll come to that. And of course, I want to know, does the US government use OKRs? But I think before that, just for the skeptics that are listening, so can you give us maybe an example of a project during your time at the government that you feel was particularly impactful?
Yeah, of course. Two come to mind. One of them is more of, so we launched a product called data.gov, right? It's this open data repository of all of the different data sets across government. And I was part of a team that, of course, helped do this. And before we were there, data sets were put on, haphazardly. You had to go find them and look for them online on the different government websites. But we pulled them all in one place. But not just that, President Obama signed an executive order saying that if you as an agency are collecting data and there's nothing private in it, you should make it public, right? You should be doing all that you can to structure it and make it useful for the American people. Because the idea there is our taxpayer dollars are funding the collection, make it public, and then all these good things can happen on top of it, right? It helps inform the public. You could build a company around it. A lot of healthcare companies are built on health data. That's one project, but the one that really I always think back on is the healthcare.gov rescue, where, I call it a rescue, and what was happening at the time is we signed this, the president signed back in 2010, the Affordable Care Act, which, I think for most of you in Europe, your website to know if you get healthcare just says yes on it, right? In the US, we had to build a login system, an application, and then you got to pick the plan, and then you got to pay for the plan. And this site was launched in October, 2013. And it just didn't work, Roxanne. It went live, and I think hundreds of thousands of people tried to get access to it. Only 6 people could get through. And after 17 days, they asked for help, and we were one of the 6 people that went in. And of course, I should caveat, 6 people we can't really fix a problem that's happening in a 3,000 person, 20 contractor, multi-billion-dollar project. But what we did when we went in there was to just change how everyone approached that problem. And I think for most folks that are here today, you'd go in and say, well, where's the monitoring, right? We asked that, and there wasn't any. So we put monitoring in. We also asked, well, where's the prioritized list of things we're working on? And there were 6, right? There was some in Excel, some in their bug tracker, some in email. And we're like, we got to have a ranked and prioritized list to work from. And then what we also did was, as this team, created what we called like kind of the war room, where we will take our time every day, 2 times, to address the most pressing issues, but to get all the decision makers in one place to say, well, if there's an issue with this, who are you waiting on to get approval from to really accelerate that? And so, yeah, the data.gov project I look fondly on. The healthcare.gov one I do as well too, because ultimately when we fixed it, and today I think 20 million Americans now have healthcare because of this website, because of the Affordable Care Act. And I love talking about that work, but then I also, of course, love talking about the work we do now too. But that's like a nostalgic.
Super.
Yeah.
Sounds like a huge impact, but it sounds like you faced a lot of very familiar startup problems with scale and launching a product that doesn't work right away, and
product market fit, right? If we build this, will people use it? Like, it's the same like feeling no matter where you go. Yeah.
Super. And tell us a little bit about how you migrated to the other side of the table and became a VC.
Yeah. So when I left government, I wanted to build another company, right? I think there's something so empowering and powerful about like seeing the world and then saying, I want to build something that changes it. And using technology is like the coolest way to do it. I think these days, it takes more than just building an app, right? You have to actually build an app that solves a problem, and that's really hard. And so I left government, started getting to work. Kleiner gave me an opportunity as an entrepreneur in residence to be able to do that. And then I think we also know, all of us here, right? You rigorously test your assumptions. You put products out early, you check the market. And for the product that I was building, after 6 months, we launched like 2 or 3 iterations of it. The metrics weren't there. And so, it's like, oh, yikes, this idea may not be the one that I need to be working on. And fortunately, at the same time, the chairman of Kleiner, John Doerr, was looking for someone to work with and to partner with on, not just on the investing side, but also about how do we tackle and fix climate change? How do we fix our healthcare system? And also this thing called OKRs as well too. How do we share with the world this kind of leadership style? And so it's been an incredible 4 or 5 years, and I've loved every moment of it, because for me right now, I think we have lots of levers we can pull to change the world. There's the build a company lever, there's the nonprofit lever, there's also change government lever, and all 3 have to be working together. So
super. Well, that's a nice way to end up at the fund. But tell me also, because it's a fund that is so well known, so famous, yet with not a huge presence in Europe. So tell maybe a lot of the people watching based here a little bit more about the fund.
Oh yeah, of course. So Kleiner Perkins is, I believe we will be 50 years old very soon. And it's a very storied firm with incredible investors investing in companies like Genentech and Google and Amazon. And our history has been to be there for founders at their first or second kind of checks, right? These days it's the Series A, but in the beginning it was their first check that these companies were raising. And for us, our philosophy has been really simple. Entrepreneurs, this is a John Doerr saying, but entrepreneurs do more than anyone thinks is possible. And so for Kleiner, our point of view is, if we can fund and invest the best people, the best founders, they can really change the world. And we do mean it. And we've seen it time and time again through our investments in, this from the beginning of the computer tech era to the internet era to the cloud era to the clean tech era as well too, which Kleiner Perkins was a heavy investor in. We learned a lot of lessons along the way, but it has proven to be successful in the longer run. But we as a firm have now a handful of partners, especially the new general partners that have been part of Kleiner. Folks might know them: Mamoon Hamid, Ilya Fushman. These are folks that were at Dropbox and invested in Slack. And so it's a great group. It's a great group with incredibly, imagine it's kind of like Station F as well too. Everyone's really deep into their world, whether it's consumer tech, enterprise tech, hard tech, right? Like the building the hard things like robotics. And so I love it here. It's a very fun, I feel like we should spend more time in Europe, but we are still a very, at least now with Zoom, I think we're spending time everywhere. So
super. And tell me personally, what are you focused on at the fund?
Yeah, so my personal focus is really been as a partner and an advisor to John Doerr, the chairman. And so we do a lot of investing through Kleiner Perkins, but we also invest outside. And if you've seen investments over the past 3 or 4 years, you'll see a pattern. It's healthcare companies that are thinking outside of the box, as well as clean tech companies that are thinking outside of the box as well too. And so our point of view in healthcare is that it's radically going to change at the point of care, right? Like how we experience the doctor's office, right? Where, as well as the underlying data behind it. In clean tech, we know that there's going to be this incredible economic transition, and it's going to be the mother of all markets, right? We spend $6 trillion on energy and all the things that come with it. So, and this is the global we, right? And so what companies need to be invested in now that are going to help us by, 2030, 40, and 50 get to zero. And so are there any companies within the Station F team working on climate or working on?
Of course, not enough. I think we don't see enough startups in this space, but hopefully people listening will take that as a sign that they should all consider, building elements of sustainability into their different projects as well. But yes, we're starting to see a lot more here. Now I want to transition a little bit to OKRs before I realize the clock is ticking actually really fast. But tell me, how did you get into OKRs? Do you have like a personal OKR story?
My introduction to OKRs, for most folks that get introduced to OKRs, it's like ex-Googlers or folks in Silicon Valley. I got introduced to them on that project, the healthcare.gov project, right? One of the folks on the rescue team, Mikey Dickerson, came from Google. And when we were in the middle of this war room at like 2 a.m. at night, we were looking at all the issues and problems and trying to discuss how do we chart a path forward. He was like, well, it's quite simple. We have to fix the website for the vast majority of people. And that's measured by 7 out of 10 people being able to get through, 1 second response time, a 1% error rate. And he just wrote that on the board. He didn't put O or the KR side. It was part of his vernacular, his vocabulary, right? He just wrote it so succinctly. Fix the website as measured by these things. And then that just stayed on the whiteboard for like that whole month. And then it continued to iterate month after month with the targets being changed. And so I saw OKRs being used in the most bureaucratic place on the planet. And I was like, well, if it can be used there, then it absolutely can be used here. And the here that I'm talking about is when, we're building new companies and starting them. But I do think that, while OKRs are very simple on the surface, how you use them is really important. And maybe a question for the folks that are listening, because I do have the chat open. I'm curious, if you have used OKRs before, can you just push like 1 and an enter into the chat? And if you haven't used OKRs before, can you put a 0 and hit an enter in the chat? I'm just curious to see what yes, oh yeah, true. There is a poll system. I apologize. I realize this is more fun. Isn't this fun? It's like fun. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, this is fantastic. So a lot of folks have had good, oh yeah, I should ask this now. Maybe for A and B now, since the 0s and 1s are coming, but if you've had great experience with OKRs, put A. If you've had questionable experiences with OKRs, put B, and maybe C for both. Yeah, okay, good. I'm really curious about the Bs, because that's the
sometimes.
And maybe for the Bs, I'm just kind of curious, like tell me a little bit more too, just so you can prompt me with stuff as we spend more time together. The question for the Bs is, when you've seen them not used well, what's really bothersome about it? What do you feel like it's not capturing or doing right? And we'll let a few of those come in, Roxanne. Sorry,
No worries. Actually,
it's like, yeah.
It gives you a good indication also of kind of how familiar people are. And I know that you have those slides. Do you want to jump right into it?
Yes, let me do that. Okay, because that's a question for the folks on the B. I'm going to present my screen just for 5 minutes, take you through quickly what OKRs are for the folks that put a 0, and then share some learnings along the way, which I hope address some of the Bs and try to convert you to A's of it. So let me do the sharing the screen and hope to do this perfectly. Okay. Perfect. Are we good?
Super.
Okay, awesome. Fantastic. For folks that don't know, there is a book that John Doerr wrote about this, and I love this book so much because it does capture the story of OKRs, where it came from Andy Grove, the Intel story, as well as a lot of different startups using it. And while we have the book, we also have a website that lets you access a lot of the stuff that's in the book, but just in a more accessible way, right? Through a Getting Started series, through stories. And so dig into whatmatters.com. I really encourage it. There's a Getting Started series that works really well. But, a lot of folks lean on OKRs because of a few reasons. A lot of times it's trying to get focus, right? What are we working on? What do we need to be doing next? Or alignment across an organization. I know for many of you, if your teams are just 6 people, alignment can still be hard, right? 6 people getting on the same page sometimes can be as hard as getting 30. But then imagine when your company is 150 people, how do you get them all working together? And this system really does help with that. It's a way to get collective commitment. It's a way to get people to track the goals that they set. And then ultimately, if things work really well, to be able to stretch as well for what you want to get done. So to define objectives and key results, OKRs, objectives are the what we're trying to accomplish, right? What are you trying to do as a team? And you're trying to write that objective as in a way that's significant, it's concrete, it's action-oriented and inspirational, right? This objective, in the case of healthcare.gov, fix this website for the American people, right? Concrete, action-oriented, and very inspirational to us. You pair it with key results, and that's the how you're going to accomplish it. And those are the descriptive bullets, right? A few of them that are specific and time bound, aggressive yet realistic, but measurable and verifiable as well too. And these are just some examples. I'm not going to go into them, but you can see that middle one is the healthcare.gov one, right? It's super concrete and action oriented as the bold piece, and then truly measurable, right? 7 out of 10, 1 second, 1% error rate, 99% uptime. I think for most folks that see this, because you all probably have systems that you're building, you're like, that doesn't seem too hard. But you got to remember, for that first metric when we said it, it was 6 over 100,000, right? That was the, basically no one was able to get through. That 1 millisecond response time was 12 seconds on average. That error rate was 10%. And then the uptime was 48%, which means we weren't up for half a day. So are you really up or down, right? So for us here, this was like our marching orders for the month ahead. But the thing that I want to share with you has been the past now, I think 3 years of learnings, right? Putting the book out there, putting the website, and spending a lot of time with very large teams, right? Public companies to a lot of startups as well too. And here are a set along the way that I think will be helpful and actually applicable to both sides of both sizes, and scales of companies. The first one to take with you is that you lead with your OKRs and you manage with KPIs, because we always get this question of like, what is the difference? How do I use them? Your OKRs are meant to capture what's the most important things you're trying to get done in your company. But that doesn't mean it's the place where you capture your task lists, your roadmaps, the things you put in Jira or product board. Those are there to really help you manage. But when the leadership part, this is what the tool you use to help describe that. And there's 2 great stories of, if folks know Allbirds, the shoe brand, Joey, one of the co-founders there, does a great job of explaining. They have their Kiwis, keep improving with intent. That's what they call their OKRs, by the way, Kiwis, keep improving with intent. They're kind of a New Zealand inspired company. And then they have their breathe list, which is their KPIs. And every meeting you go into, you focus on your OKRs first, and then the KPIs and all those other lists next. The other thing to do is you need to clearly define what success looks like. That's the key result part. And the 3 categories of them are this. If you've read the book, Measure What Matters, we only talk about the first 2, committed and aspirational. Remember when Andy Grove came up with this system, I believe there was only the aspirational OKR. The Googler said, well, some OKRs we set, we want them to be really hard to achieve, right? And so they have to be a little bit more aspirational. But some OKRs, we got to get 100%, right? Sometimes it's sales targets, sometimes it's uptime. These things, if I set a target of 99% uptime and we get 70, that's not a success, it's a failure. And so committed goals are the ones that we have to meet. And a way you can do this so easily is when you write that key result or that OKR, just put like a C next to it, right? This one we're committing, team, that we're going to get across the finish line, right? The 100% is what we're aiming for. An aspirational goal is drawing the finish line a little bit farther out and maybe hard to get to, right? We don't know. We're going to push the team here. And you may have heard the saying that 70% is success in this world. What that really means is not 70% of every key result you write, but in the course of a year, some of these key results some of these OKRs you knock out of the park and get like 140% achievement. Some of them you aim low and get 60, but on average, you're getting 70% there as you look across all of them. But with these two, we spent a lot of time with startups that said, well, OKRs are still not for me, right? Like they are pointing us in a direction. We don't necessarily know what we're building yet. We don't have product market fit. And so what we've done with both a set of startups as well as research groups and big companies is that there's a different way to craft an OKR, and it's in the learning lens, right? So if the first two are for committed and aspirational, what do we want to get done in the next 90 days? The learning OKR is, what are we trying to learn in the next 90 days? What do we need to learn, right? The hypothesis that says that we should be doing what we're doing, right? If we're thinking about entering the small, medium business market, right? Let's craft an OKR that tells us, yes, we're actually doing that well before creating an OKR that commits us to that direction. And so I hope this third type of OKR, this learning one, can really help some of the companies part of Station F that are still in that discovery state, right? And the neat part about this is, you can set up a lot of these OKRs to learn different things to help you test your hypotheses before you go after them. This is an important lesson as well too. You are the best judge of what a great OKR is. It is an art and a science. You can have many types of key results. Some of them are inputs, right? The things you do. Some of them are outputs, the results of those. And then some of them are outcomes, the things that have changed. If you look online, the consensus is try to make your OKRs as outcome focused as possible, because that's the really hard thing to measure. But it's okay if you have them on the outputs or just the inputs, right? Jeff Bezos will say, I only manage my business on inputs because those are the things that I control. Andy Grove would say, well, the outputs are what help you understand if your business is doing what you committed it to do. But I think today the outcomes are perhaps the most important, right? And maybe if I give you an example, an input would be, the things you control, right? This is the features you add, the performance of things. The outputs are, the revenue numbers, number of users, but the outcomes are probably the return rate, the net promoter score, the retention, right? The harder thing to measure. And when you craft an OKR, pick inputs, outputs, and outcomes. And then the last two pieces are really quick. The OKR should match your pace. If you look at most of our content online, we say it's quarterly, but most of you move so fast that it shouldn't be quarterly, right? It should be something like maybe 6 weeks or a month, or really up to you. And the flip also holds true for matching your pace. For some organizations, they don't think in quarters, they think in trimesters, right? Schools or other organizations, or, for some sports teams that have adopted OKRs, they've made it how their season works. And, the big piece to take away is that it takes a team to make any of these things happen. So don't just craft these OKRs alone. I always find that I get the most joy out of OKRs when I share them with someone else, because I know mine aren't perfect. And so getting that feedback really, really is super important. So lead with OKRs, define that success. You're the judge, match your pace. It's so important to do that, because if OKRs feel like they're just dragging you behind or they're too aggressive, you get to change them. And it takes a team, not just the CEO, not just the COO, but everyone to really make this a success. Those are my slides, Roxanne. I hope they were helpful.
Perfect. It was great. I think probably the audience loved it as well. In the meantime, you did get quite a few replies as to what the frustrations have been. So applicability, the follow-up, integration into of different OKRs of the company to serve the KPIs of the company, hard to define. Some people ask, do they apply to all organizations, all teams? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh, so many questions. I love them. For the folks that are in the chat, I realized there's so many more structured things in this app. If you, for the ones that didn't put it in the questions, if you could, because I'm going to click on that tab. And so I think like Laura, Omar, Melanie, and Nathan, I'm hoping to see yours on the right-hand side now. Let's take a few of these. Antonin, let's redo this one first. How do OKRs scale to an 80,000 employee company asking for a friend? I'll take that question, Antonin, as like if you just have 8 people right now and then getting to 80,000, and then if you're the 80,000 person company, the best way to start with OKRs is just a blank sheet of paper, a Google Doc, right? A place where everyone can see them and access them together. And as you grow, what you'll realize, you'll see the need to add more layers. And I should re-say that. So for your entire company, you should be able to craft all of your OKRs on a single sheet of paper, or i.e. a Google Doc, right? It's just 6 of us or 8 of us. We should be able to capture our goals there. But as soon as we start to grow a little bit more, right? Different departments and teams, you know, maybe then each of those groups need their OKRs as well too. But even as you grow, remember, some departments and teams are just 1 or 2 people, right? So it's like, don't create that excess burden. But what you'll feel is as you grow, that one company OKR becomes company and team OKRs, and then company and team become individual as well too. And so that layering of it should feel very natural. For a lot of teams that are on the 80,000 side and just starting out, they'll go, well, Google does it from top to bottom on day one. Well, but remember, Google started with these when John Doerr taught it to them with just 20 people. And so they were able to teach everyone, right? Every new Googler that comes in, no matter what layer you are, can get, you know, has role models everywhere. And so if you're that 80,000 person company starting today, start at the top, then have your departments do it. And then just gradually, after every quarter or after every cycle, let it trickle down into the company. What you'll find is, for most of those folks, is when you start at the top and show your organization, this is how we're thinking and articulating things, people will follow suit and try to emulate. And so it's really neat. Let's see, let me upvotes. I'll just take them. Should I just take them one at a time, Roxanne? That probably is the fastest. Yeah. Popularity does this. How to apply OKRs? Yeah. So for OKRs for sales folks, you know, you and your team know your sales targets really well. A lot of times OKRs applied to sales folks feel like the committed category, right? Like you need to make this 20 client target, $200,000 target, or whatever it ends up being. That's okay, right? But like the thing that I'd warn is that you know, your sales folks know what their quotas are, right? And so you're tracking them in a different system or different place. Remember, leading with OKRs and managing with KPIs, you have your sales and quota trackers that exist. And so think about, what does it mean if you shift those there and use your OKRs to really ask that sales team, what do we need to get done in the quarter ahead? What do we need to do to make us the most effective, to close deals and sales? And how do we measure that? And what you may find is it's actually measuring a lot of other things, right? Number of doors knocked on, number of like campaigns sent, or campaigns and events put on that turn into follow. Like you and the team as a sales team should use the OKRs as a continual improvement device for the sales org. Because you got that quota sheet to do the hard stuff, right? The harder number piece, but use the OKRs to lead them to be a better sales group. How to avoid for the KR task related time? OKRs, yes. Felipe, this one here is so important. There's always this temptation to put in the OKR, launch by X, ship by Y, launch these features. And that's not the best use of a KR. What the best use is that when it's launched, what happens, right? What was the expectation of the product, right? Was it users? Was it conversions? Was it a response time, reliability? Like there's all these other things that all the work that's going into the website is supposed to do. And so make those the things that are there. And then you have your roadmap and Jira tracker for the list of items that make the OKR possible. There's a fun blog post, I think, online somewhere, but it's like they call them OKRs plus the activities, which the acronym is okra, which is a vegetable. That's really good. But it's like you have your OKRs, but the activities and project stuff, you got to track separately. because what will happen, I should share the most powerful thing about OKRs is one part is the starting of them and using them as a strategy for your team, but they really are the most powerful at the end of the quarter when you look back on them and say, how did we do? Right? Very unobjectively saying we did it, we didn't, we got halfway, and then reflecting as a team of, well, okay, we learned so much this quarter. What do we need to do in the next quarter to make up, what do we need to do differently? It's not about blame. It's not about Ryan doing something wrong or Roxanne. It's nothing of that. All of it is to help give you an input to set better goals for the quarter ahead. You should be so comfortable crumpling up the OKRs from last quarter after you spend time with them as a team and throwing them away, right? And just focusing on the quarters ahead. We launched OKRs 2 quarters ago, and we had very good results on the business side. We struggled to clear defined product development. How to define meaningful OKRs? That's a good question. My background is in industrial engineering, and so my brain is jumping. If it's hardware product development, are there quality scores? Are there a certain number of runs that need to be done? What's the output? This is the Andy Grove, right? I think you'd love reading the chapter in the book about Andy Grove because it's a hardware operation. It's like the fab thing needs to be this size and the quality needs to look like this, and engineering needs to have something by then. And so that's a lot of the how we build the hardware product. But you may also want to set a set of OKRs to track, was that product successful to the user? Was it successful in the field? I guess it's just redefining, who are you measuring success for? You as a company producing the thing, but then put your customer hat on. Why would I love this product over the next 90 days? Well, I'm using it every day. It's not breaking down on me, right? Think about it that way for that one. Chris, which tools? I love a simple Google Doc or sheet. We have a few templates online on whatmatters.com. But also just don't be afraid to go to the whiteboard and write it virtual. Put them anywhere. They're so easy. Objective, key results, index card style. And then there's going to be a point as a team you may search for tools, and definitely do that. But first, fall in love with how to use OKRs, how to just easily jump in a Google Doc to edit things before jumping to the tool. Because what I found is some teams that jump to tools too quickly conflate the tool not working well or working well with the strategy working well or not working well. So Nathan, I think I answered the question. Yes, they do hardware product development projects. Absolutely, 100%. I think OKRs can apply anywhere. Taking them out of the startup context. If we're a nonprofit, we should have OKRs too. What are we setting out to do as a nonprofit? This quarter ahead, is it, we can have a few goals, right? As a team, you can, as a company, it's 2 to 3 objectives and key results, right? For the whole should describe everything you are trying to do. Lucian, OKRs are getting things done. I think OKRs are a way to articulate your strategy, right? This is what we're doing and this is what we're not doing. The OKRs do a good job of that. Getting things done is if I'm remembering the philosophy, right? The inbox zero, the way to tag your work items, that's a style of working. So it's not an or, I think it's an and. How do you redefine and prioritize OKRs? Lucas, good question. How do you redefine and prioritize OKRs as you're pivoting and redefining your product and value proposition? This one here, I hope, is where the learning OKR comes in, right? Because, we have been a part of companies, of course, that have done really well, but there have been companies that, we don't talk too much about, right? Because they don't end up being that company that pivots well enough and does those things. And, for some of those companies, they are using OKRs, but those OKRs are sending them off a cliff. And, it's up to you and the team to realize, are we heading toward that cliff that's actually not one that's helpful? And in the case example of this company that I'm thinking about, the model that we set out was just unsustainable. If for every transaction we lost $6, so the cliff was very expensive. And for us, we should have done an OKR exercise of, hey, is this cliff we're going on actually the right one, right? Shouldn't we maybe be focused? This is the small, medium business market example that I always keep thinking about. It's we should have pivoted away from consumers where we were losing the $6 to one that should have been a more small, medium business focused product where we were making money And so the pivot, the redefinition, these KRs are meant to help you every week, right? Like, because you can track them. We're making progress, we're not, this is red or yellow. What is that telling you as a team to do, right? Whenever a KR goes from green to yellow or yellow to red, it should mean to you as a team, we need a plan to fix it. And if it ends up staying yellow and red, it's like, well, shoot, what's going completely wrong here? Is it, oh, that's right, COVID happened. Okay, we now know it's COVID, so we have to change all of our strategies, right? It's responding to an external situation. But what if this red and yellow green are actually things happening in your team? And, from a product, like it's just not clicking. Well, then I think that's where, Lucas, you and the team have to maybe switch to that learning mode a little bit and say, well, how do we change our product to be more useful? What do we need to do to prove that this pivot we're about to take works? That sort of forces you to get out of the, Figma and coding environments and kind of go outside and the Zooms, right? Because it's still COVID time, right? But like spending time with your customers to find out, really, do they get value of what you have? Omar, how to define the OKRs that matter? That's a beautiful question. I think if you can find a way for, the OKRs are the what and the how, objectives are the what, KRs are the how, can they also help answer the why, right? When you see the OKR, you clearly know why you're doing it, right? As a company, the beautiful thing about companies is they create jobs, they help solve problems, they do so much for people. And so when you define your OKRs, you really want to help make, your teams, the people that work for you, because I assume this group is predominantly leaders and the founders of these companies, they should look at them and go, oh, I see what I'm supposed to feel, right? If you're a delivery company, it's like empowering our local businesses. That's the lens I should take on the objective. But that doesn't mean your KRs shouldn't have revenue numbers or targets that are more monetary, right? And this is a piece of advice I give for nonprofits, for-profits, right? What we are here, and even in governments. It's really important for all of our organizations to understand how we survive, how we're sustainable. Right? If the people that work for our companies or work in governments or work at nonprofits don't understand the engine for what makes it work, I think we're doing a disservice to the folks that work for us, right? They should understand that, more deliveries, right? Yes, the satisfaction of the, restaurant owner and all these things have to be at play. And so that's my long-winded way of saying, go for the why in defining your OKRs, but don't be afraid to put a revenue target, a number, not a revenue target if it seems disconnected, but there's more like, a KR for a nonprofit, by the way, right? Like, why do you have fundraisers or galas or balls, right? You do it so the nonprofit can do all the other work. And so you shouldn't hide that from the team. I know it was a little rambling answer, but I hope that message gets across. Maybe I'll take a few more and then Roxanne, we can switch back. Any particular tips on OKRs with startups from an incubator? From an incubator perspective, so I guess that probably means that you're in discovery mode. And so that learning OKR, and don't take 6 months to learn it or a quarter to learn it. Like what can you craft that you could learn in 2 weeks, right? Or 2 days. One of my favorite exercises is, it kind of applies to OKRs, but it's really anything, right? It's really around like customer discovery. It's like, well, if we had 6 months, what would we do? 6 months, right? To learn more about a customer. And, you'd come up with all the things you could do. And it's like, okay, well, you don't have 6 months. You have, just 2. And it's like, you come up with all the things. And it's like, well, you don't have 2 months. What if you have only 2 weeks, right, to do these things? You're like, well, okay, if I don't have 2 months to do 2 weeks, what if you only have 2 days to learn about your customer? What would you do? And then my favorite is, well, what if you only have 2 hours? So yeah, that's the exercise. It's 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, and only 2 hours to learn. And so in that incubator sense, if you're trying to learn something, what would I have to do to learn that in 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, and 2 hours? And you kind of see all the different paths and you're like, oh, actually this 2-day one, I could learn a lot from that one. Let's do that. Alejandro, I do not know the answer to that question. I will try to find, oh yeah, Melanie, this is a very important question. Is it okay to have OKRs set for the full year and then split them? Sort of. I think it's really powerful for you and the team to set a really long-term objective and keep like an OKR, like maybe just one, like for the year ahead. if we're successful, this is the one you kind of keep in your pocket in the corner. It's in the whiteboard, maybe in the top right, but it's like, if we're successful in the year ahead, what has happened, right? What key results will be true? Is it a user target? Is it what says we're successful, and how would you describe that objective? And when you're seeing that, it's like, okay, that's our most North Star. So for the quarter at hand, what are the 2 to 3 objectives and key results that we're going to craft that keep us pointed towards that most North Star? And so you say to split them within quarters. I would not say split them. Don't make it where you're crafting Q1, 2, 3, 4 a year ahead. What you should do is spend every quarter at the start to say, that's the North Star. This is what we're going to do in this quarter to get as far as we can. And then, you do that work. And then at the end of the quarter, you go, well, okay, how far did we do? Okay, cool. That North Star, this is how far we did. What if you actually got a lot closer to that North Star than you thought? Well, let's set more ambitious goals. Or let's say you didn't. Well, let's rethink our goals or our strategy. And maybe this North Star, we have to change that too. You and the team should feel so comfortable at any time to change your OKRs if they're pointing you in the wrong direction. But the key is getting that alignment and commitment from the team, right? Hey, this isn't working, right? We all see these reds and yellows. We need to change these things together. Roxanne, what are do you see other ones that we should tackle together?
Yeah, you got so many questions. I'm amazed. I think we went over quite a bit of them. For small startups, there's one question from Mathieu. Is the only objective that matters growth?
For small startups is the, that's a good question. It's a yes and question, I think, right? Like growth matters, but sustainability matters. The thing you're built, like there's so much to it, right? I think it's about growth once you're locked into the right thing. Because you could have growth that's unsustainable, right? Or you could have growth building something that you're not aligned with, right? You could have growth, I think it's a very nuanced question. Mathieu, the truth is there's so many other measures that are super important for you as a leader of your company to make sure it's strong, durable, and going to be like one of those companies that gets to the 80,000 to the 100,000 employees and changes the world. And I think you have to really focus on those measures to create that durable organization. But growth does matter too. We're in the context of an incubator. I work for a venture capital fund. When we look at the success of an idea, the growth pieces matter. The pace of growth matters. And so that's something you and the team have to always keep into account as well. But I should share, there are investments that are made by folks that do come in before growth happens, right? Mamoon Hamid, one of our general partners, there's incredible stories online if you Google about it. But, when he made his investment into Slack, they didn't have the growth piece, but they did have measures of success on usability, measures of success on stickiness, all these other things that proved, hey, this growth thing can happen. So, I hope that answer was helpful, Mathieu.
That's a very good answer. And I think we'll take one more from the list. How to keep OKRs in mind and not lose focus during an entire month or whatever the period is, I guess.
Oh, yeah. That's a great question. And I'm also realizing Lisa's here as well, too, who's in the chat and dropping case studies and stories. And Lisa's on our team. She's our chief storyteller and all the good things for us. And so if you love any of our stories and stuff, it's all Lisa who makes those parts happen. The best way to track them, the best way to keep them in mind is, today, I actually think for everybody here, if you're not using OKRs, it's actually evening for you almost. So maybe it's over with a glass of red wine, something I didn't think be, but sketch out on that index card what it could look like, right? Like what a set of objectives and key results could be, and then work with your team through the week to really refine them. And then you've locked them in, right? And what you should do and feel is that next week and the week after, when you have your staff meetings, you're always looking back to them as the sign of success, of are we working on the right things or not? And so let me answer that more succinctly. you know OKRs are working well if you're always referring back to them, or they're the things that you end up talking the most about, right? The things that are in them. If you find that there are other things consuming you and your team's time, shouldn't those things be a part of the OKRs, or shouldn't the OKR capture the outcomes and outputs of them? One of the best pieces of advice that we love to apply is just send out all the calendar invites to your team in advance, right? For, if you decide to do it every 6 weeks or every month, it's like, okay, this day we're setting our OKRs, this day we're reflecting on them, this day and just send them out for the year ahead. Because you all are so busy that, like, you're right, Roxanne, people, like, we're just so busy working in the zone. But when you see that calendar invite for that 2 hours or that 1 hour with your team on reflection, you'll take it because you're like, oh yeah, these OKRs are important to us. Let's spend that 2 hours together and then keep going.
Super. We still have so many OKR questions, but I think...
Let me see. I can see Eisenhower. I do not know, Alejandro. What can we do for key results overlapping? Oh, that's a good question, Farzad. These are all great questions. I can tell everyone is really deep in the trenches, just getting stuff done. Key results for overlapping issues is powerful, right? Because when you set, not powerful, it's like an important quality of OKRs. You're setting an objective and key result. Multiple teams likely own them, right? Multiple teams likely are responsible for parts and pieces. And so by crafting them collectively together, you are helping teams align, right? Because if I'm on the customer service team and Roxanne heads up our engineering team, and there's an objective and key result around, the renewal rate, the satisfaction rate, well, we both own that, right? And so we'll negotiate and talk about, well, what's the right targets? What can I do? What can you do? What key results maybe I should own? What should she own? That's the way to think about it. Like when you make an OKR that multiple teams own, you're going to see alignment. But what should also happen too is in our own teams, and Roxanne goes to her engineering teams and I go to my customer service and operation teams, we will take that objective and then craft our own, right, to build up to it. How to perform the integration of different OKRs from different team into a coherent system. This part here, the way I'm reading it, Omar, I think is this is kind of where the magic or the messiness of OKRs comes in, right? You at the top level of your company, you set those objectives and key results, 2 or 3 objectives with a few key results. And then when you share them with the company, everyone on every team is going to go, well, I own that one, so I'll take this, but I'm going to craft 1 or 2 OKRs myself. And that all starts to end up being this really cool thing where there's some stuff that we're very rigidly aligned, but then there's all these objectives and key results that are all not, directly getting cascaded from leadership, but they're really the important things to work on. And so that's one way that things come into play. But KPIs, you should be tracking lots of them. They should be meaningful to you and your team. But I always like to say OKRs are KPIs with soul, right? It's a KPI that you are putting in a direction that you want to change. And so you've elevated it into your OKR. And then when you're done, you can take it off, right? And you can pick a different one. How often should they be updated? Antonin, this is like the OKRs themselves. We like to say change them every quarter. That's that pace kind of thing, like revisit them, see if you need to rewrite, remove, add. But you should be looking at them every week, every day in some meetings. It should be an active thing that everyone is using. Samples and templates, whatmatters.com is a great place, Miriam. Do we apply OKRs the same way when working with, yes, Miriam. Do we apply OKRs the same way when working with nonprofits and for-profits? I wish I could put the mic on Lisa and she'd be saying, yes, 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 absolutely. Like the system of OKRs is purely about leadership, and it's purely about what you and your team want to accomplish, right? And then it's forcing you and that team to describe it in such a succinct, short little way. And any team should be able to do that. So, yeah, Lisa, there we go. Yes, yes, yes.
Super. I think we got through all the questions that we had. We're just at almost time. So I will ask one more related question. Actually, I'm curious to know which organizations or which teams do you feel struggle the most with OKRs? Why would that be the case? Why do they have trouble adopting or trouble understanding or whatever the reason is?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sometimes we'll have teams that will, we'll give a talk like this, and a team will come up from, the legal department or from another department and say, that OKR stuff is great, but it's not for us, right? That's for the rest of the company to do, right? Right? And I'm like, no, it's for you as well too, right? Just respond to the question. What are we trying to change or do different in the next 90 days? And they're like, oh yeah, we're trying to do this and this and this. You're like, those are your OKRs. Right. And so that's usually the first. And then it is that startup and R&D kind of world where they look at these OKRs and they sometimes push them off cliffs too soon and in ways that they didn't expect. And so the learning OKR is really meant to try to solve for that. Craft one before you.
Super. Well, Ryan, I think it has been really impressive, not only watching you answer all the different questions on OKRs, but also keeping nearly 100 people entertained on the topic of OKRs for an entire hour. So thank you so much. I can see that Lisa is also posting some final info. So I think just one last time for people who are interested, that's probably the best place for them to head for resources is whatmatters.com. You guys have so much on there. Is there anything else that you want to say to the audience before we wrap up this session?
Oh, I would love to say, have fun with them. They end up being this tool that I think, we have all the places we can craft our strategy, right? The memos, the PDFs, the prototypes, and those are so important, right? Because that's where the heart is, right? And those documents and images and things. But these OKRs, I hope you realize how simple they can be. And so have fun with them. They do take time though. And so for your team, really make them yours, right? Like if you want to tweak them in some way, tweak them. If you want to adjust them to fit the way that you work, please do. And if you have more questions, Lisa put in the email address, which is hello@whatmatters.com, and would love to help answer them. And I think from all of us here, we'd love to, we'll see you all soon. I think, there's hope, but I know things are really hard right now for you and the team in Paris and in France in particular. So we are thinking about you. Please be safe, mask up. There is light at the end of this tunnel, finally, but I know things are so hard over there right now. So I'm thinking of you. We are all thinking of you, and wishing you all the very, very, very best.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. It has been great. I don't know if you can see all the comments. People are super enthusiastic. I think this was more like therapy for them somehow. And so, everybody can also send their questions along to hello@whatmatters. Thank you so much for taking time. Has been wonderful. And I think it's been really meaningful to a lot of our entrepreneurs. So thanks so much, Ryan.
Good luck, everyone. Have a wonderful week. Okay.
Bye-bye.